Hello and welcome to the Literary Lair. The results of the Star Trek viewer poll are in, and the winner is... Star Trek New Frontier House of Cards. You know, I am actually pretty relieved, because I was sure when I started this poll that The Price of the Phoenix was gonna win, but after having read this book, I am really glad that the poll forced me to finally get around to reading New Frontier, because it was a pretty great experience, but that's getting ahead of ourselves. Star Trek New Frontier is actually a really cool concept for a Star Trek series. The concept, which was a joint effort between famous Trek novelist Peter David, who I've discussed numerous times on the show before, and who wrote some of my all-time favorite Star Trek books ever, and John J. Ordover, a now former editor for Pocket Books, was this: a Star Trek book series that didn't focus on any of the major events or major characters from the televised series. David created some of his own characters, and Ordover contributed the idea to use periphery characters from the TV series, ones who only appeared a few times. Notable ones include Robin Leffler from The Game, Dr. Salar from The Schizoid Man, and Commander Shelby from The Best of Both Worlds, all who previously appeared on The Next Generation. Rounding out the new/reused character idea was David, who also brought in 3 characters from his Starfleet Academy novels he wrote that centered on Worf, bringing back some of those characters now as older Starfleet officers. The thing with an idea like this is, when you have built-in characters like Kirk and Picard, the story opportunities are obvious, but you can also run into problems with messing up the established characters. But that's just it. They're already established, so you don't have to really work all that hard to make readers care about them. Whereas if you're starting from scratch like this, it could be complicated. House of Cards was a tall order for the author, but you guys wanted to see it, or at least a little over half of you did, because House of Cards won by 1 vote. But regardless, New Frontier was the winner. So let's finally check out this frankly ambitious start to a well-liked and highly regarded series. Engage. I'm reading from a collected edition, but the cover for book 1 is, bland as all hell. I mean, it's nice that we get to see Captain Calhoun in all his glory, but it's boring. It's like those Quantum Leap covers that I really hate, the one where it's just Al and Sam standing in front of a weird background. The highlights of this one is that we see Picard and Spock in the background, so we can be sure that we're in for a treat, because 2 characters we actually know are in the book. Up top, we've got the tagline, a new ship, a new crew, a new mission. Which would be impressive, but that's like the MO for every new Star Trek series since The Next Generation, so it's kinda lost its wonder. Underneath, we get the name of the series, Star Trek New Frontier, and I really like the logo design. It's both very Star Trek-like, but also new and fresh in terms of presentation. Plus, I'm a sucker for that font. Other than that, we've got Book 1 at the bottom, near Peter David's name, and to be honest, other than the novelty of seeing Captain Calhoun alongside Spock and Picard, and the fact that we also get a really good look at Calhoun's species, the Xenexians, with their trademark purple eyes and relative similarity to humans, because that's how sci-fi works, it's pretty boring. Let's get to the story itself. Okay, so like the Bernie Summerfield story, this one's gonna be a little different than usual. See, like I said before, I hadn't actually read this before putting it in the poll, so upon reading it, I found that it's not actually one big story. It's actually several short stories. To keep with the theme that we did Iron Man 2 last week, House of Cards is like the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Phase 1, setting up all the backstory for the characters so that they can unite and join together in the following book. This book is all short vignettes of everyone's backstory, and as such, we're going to approach it like that. The book opens in 2353, where Mackenzie of Calhoun on the planet Xenex out in the desert, fighting back against the Danteri, who have enslaved the Xenexians for several years. Calhoun had visions while doing a rite of passage that showed him leading a successful revolt, and he's followed that to the letter, finally reaching victory against one of the Danteri's top military leaders, Falcar. Not that one, you know I said Falcar. Falcar, during their altercation, manages to slice half of Calhoun's face, but because Calhoun knows the desert better than him, he uses it to his advantage to get the upper hand and slay his opponent, taking his sword and using Falcar's welder to cauterize his face. While wandering through the desert in the haze, he has visions of a naked blonde woman and of a bald man with an English accent wearing a red uniform, who tells him that he is a Starfleet captain and he has a destiny to fulfill. Only problem is, Calhoun doesn't know what the hell Starfleet is, or the identity of the bald man. Or the naked blonde woman, for that matter. Eventually, Calhoun's brother finds him and brings him home, where he recovers. Upon his recovery, the Danteri approach the Xenexians to attempt brokering for peace, bringing along an unbiased party, the Federation, to mediate. The ship that the Federation sends is the USS Stargazer, whose captain, Jean-Luc Picard, is a very accomplished ambassador. He arrives with his first officer, Jack Crusher, and they meet with Calhoun, who brushes them off, although he is taken aback at first by Picard, because Picard is the bald man from his visions, though he asks Picard about the naked woman, and Picard doesn't know anything. Picard encourages Calhoun to consider a career in Starfleet, as Calhoun tells the Danteri that the only way that they'll have peace is if they'll pick up and get the hell off their world. We then jump forward a decade, where Solita, a Vulcan scientist, is on the planet Thalon, investigating their xenophobic and isolationist empire. However, she gets so wrapped up in her work that she fails to notice that a cadre of Thalonians is sneaking up on her, and they take her into custody, though Solita is pretty single-minded, as she ignores their questions and continues her research until they stun her. She's put in a cell and told that their legal system works fast, and that she already had her trial and is set to be executed as a spy. She's then joined by a cloaked figure who simply sits down and it's Spock. I know we do this whole thing where I pretend that this is my first time reading it, even though I obviously read it in order to make the video, but that was my actual thought process when I was reading the book for the first time. Cloaked figure showed up. I went in utterly blind to this, by the way. I didn't even know that the cover was referring to this story, since the collection has all 4 covers on it, and I immediately put the book down and noted to myself that it was Spock. 9 times out of 10, a silent cloaked figure in a prison cell or other seedy place is Spock. And it is. He was also studying the Thalonians, but he was disguised as one of them. Though being Spock, when he found out about a spy about to be executed, he outed himself so he could get to the dungeon in order to mount a rescue. And you wonder why Spock is my favorite character in all of Star Trek. He willingly put himself in danger to save a stranger. Needs of the many indeed. Using his intelligence and strength, he breaks them free, and as they leave, they're caught by C. Swan, who had witnessed Solita's ignoring of the Chancellor when she was captured. Solita informs him that the Thalonian Empire has 20 years left, at best, and Swan returns her IDIC pin that had been taken from her while she was unconscious. Other than that, he allows them to leave, saying that he did it because her escape will annoy the Chancellor, but it's clear that he doesn't entirely agree with his people's xenophobia, and after they leave, he muses on Solita as a friend. Then we jump to 2371, where Dr. Salar has taken a leave of absence from her duties aboard the Enterprise D in order to undergo the Ponfar ritual with her decided mate Voltok. She's nervous about it, and while her and her mate perform the act in a fairly logical way, all the excitement causes Voltak to have a heart attack, and because the two are telepathically connected, she's unable to preserve his Katra before he dies. Blaming the emotions they both shared, she decides to dedicate her life to logic. In 2373, the Thelonian Empire has collapsed, as Solida had predicted, and their royal family is destroyed, save for C. Swan. The Enterprise E has been tasked with traveling to Deep Space 5 in order to meet with C. Swan and handle the diplomatic tensions that have arisen from such an event, meant to be an allegory for the collapse of the Soviet Union, which had happened not too long before the New Frontier books were written. Of course, that doesn't mean it's all seriousness, as when Riker remarks that he feels like a mother duck, since they're escorting a group of smaller ships, Data mentions that Riker does have a tendency to waddle, which makes Troy laugh, and annoys Riker to all hell. Troy calls it more of a swagger, and they arrive at DS5, meeting with its commanding officer, Admiral Edward Jellicoe, who you might remember as that jerk who replaced Picard in Chain of Command, who was a total dick to Riker. Jellicoe says that they'll hold the negotiations on board the Enterprise since DS5 is filled to the brim with refugees from the Thelonian Empire, and Picard manages to inform their special guest of that fact. Their special guest being, of course, Spock. The meeting consists of Picard, Riker, Spock, Jellicoe, Admiral Nechayev, a Dantari ambassador named Rajan, and C. Swan. Negotiations don't go great, since the Dantari want to swoop in and claim all the Thelonian Empire stuff, and C. Swan wants the Federation to swoop in as peacekeepers, but Nechayev shoots it down as it's breaking the Prime Directive. Now, I always figured that it was meant to stop unwanted help, like not placing yourself as knowing the best course of action for another group of people, as opposed to someone from that place requesting it, but I guess I was wrong. The delegation manages to reach an accord where Starfleet will send one ship into the sector, 221G, to gain intel and give aid along the way. They just need a ship, and Jellicoe recommends the Ambassador-class USS Excalibur, recently pulled out of service because of the Borg attack back in First Contact. In that attack, her captain was killed though, so they need someone to take the con. C. Swan agrees to this, as long as he gets to serve on the ship as well, but Nechayev and Jellicoe shoot it down, though Picard and Riker lobby for it. Better to have a guide who knows the neighborhood, after all. Jellicoe and Picard both make recommendations to Nechayev regarding the captain's chair. Jellicoe wants to put in Commander Shelby, who Picard knows of because she served as first officer under Riker during the Battle of Wolf 359, while Picard was assimilated as Locutus. She's not a bad officer, but she's too ambitious for her own good, having gone over Riker's head a few times. Picard, on the other hand, recommends Mackenzie Calhoun, though he's recently left Starfleet to deal in underhanded activities. After dismissing Jellicoe, Nechayev informs Picard that, like Chekhov and Uhura before him, that was all Section 31 type stuff, done with the complete endorsement from Nechayev herself. But she admits that all this cloak and dagger stuff is harmful for Calhoun's psyche, and wants him for the Excalibur position to repair the damage done to him already. She sends Picard to retrieve him, and after some prodding, including Picard saying the stuff that Calhoun had the visions of back before they met, about his destiny of a Starfleet captain, Calhoun agrees to take the position. Back on Earth, Solida is contacted by Starfleet and told that she's being moved from a teaching position at the Academy to the USS Excalibur, on the recommendation of Ambassador Spock. However, before she can pack her things and leave, someone puts a phaser into her back and tells her to do exactly as they say, or else, as the story ends. The characters, established or otherwise, are written extremely well. The established characters are exactly as they were on the show. It helps that David has an amazing grasp on those characters, before dishonor notwithstanding. Picard's conversations with the young Calhoun are very reminiscent of his conversations with Wesley in The First Duty, where he encourages the young prodigy to forge a path in Starfleet. Riker is good too, though he's not really there for a lot, and really his contribution is the tension we get with Jellicoe that relates back to Jellicoe's appearance on The Next Generation. We get the stupid android tricks with Data, which is funny, but it also feels a little forced, since this is taking place following First Contact, when Data has made a lot of strides with knowing humanity and recognizing metaphors and such. It felt like that scene in the finale of The Next Generation, All Good Things, where Picard is back in the past before arriving at Farpoint Station, and is baffled by Data's confusion over burning the midnight oil. Though it lets us get a good jab at Riker for comedic value, which is a staple of The Next Generation, so I'll let it slide. Jellicoe and Nechayev, considering that Jellicoe only appeared in one episode and Nechayev had a few appearances on The Next Generation, are exactly as they were in those appearances, though I like how Nechayev has somewhat softened from her rigid and seemingly Picard-hating behavior in Chain of Command. The fact that she actually agrees with Picard is a welcome aspect of her character, so we get to see a difference between the two Starfleet bureaucrats. Calhoun is written brilliantly, and so far, he's my favorite character. He fought an entire war on a hallucination that he believed was a prophetic vision. He had no proof of that, but he went and did it, and he succeeded. And he's a goddamn badass. Half his face was falling off, and he managed to not only take down Falkar, but then he performed surgery on himself. Plus, he stood up to Picard and told him to go to hell. Forget Chuck Norris facts, we need Mackenzie Calhoun facts. Mackenzie Calhoun once forced a Klingon to commit Hegbat because they bumped into each other in a corridor. Mackenzie Calhoun might be the only captain in Starfleet history that I think could go toe-to-toe with Sisko, and it would end in a draw because their badassery would cancel each other's out. And that's just when Calhoun was 19. We also get some rumblings of how he lost his previous ship, the USS Grissom, the ship that's second in line for the title Starfleet's bitch, because between the one from Star Trek 3 and this one, both of them got blown up. And those rumblings are very effective at building a mystique around Calhoun's interim period, between his first meeting with Picard and where the story starts. When Picard finds him, he's in the middle of killing a dude who killed a guy that Calhoun had a life debt to. Much darker than that 19-year-old freedom fighter, but no less badass. I can't even imagine the badassery that the rest of this series is going to show us. Solita is interesting. She's not like any Vulcan that I've ever seen, taking unnecessary risks, showing some manner of emotion. Something is up with her. I guess we'll figure that out in the next book. Her interactions with Spock are phenomenal, and speaking of Spock, his appearance in this book was very welcome, because David portrays him very well. One of the best bits he has in this book is when he's in the cell with Solita, and when she discovers his identity, she remarks about how he's the Spock, Captain Kirk Spock, to which Spock retorts, I was unaware that I was considered his property. There's also some genuine comedy where Solita profusely apologizes to Spock, and Spock responds with how apologies are unnecessary, only for her to apologize again. Considering Spock's level of fame within the Star Trek universe, that's how I have to assume that it would go if I ever met Linkara. Their interactions with C-Swan, despite C-Swan being sort of evil, or at least as evil as we're led to believe, since anyone who has an empire in Star Trek is evil. Terran Empire, Klingon Empire, Romulan Star Empire. Then again, how is anything called an empire going to be on the level in good? I do like how he's taking an interest in the sector and wants to join the Excalibur's crew in order to help, though his help might be more related to wanting to re-grasp his lost power, but that's yet to be seen. Dr. Salar, well, we don't really get that much with her, and I admit she's only got that one Next Gen episode, which I have seen, but she makes a stronger impression here, though not enough for me to get a good gauge on what she's really like yet. We'll probably get more on that when the crew unites in Book 2. At least I assume that they'll unite in Book 2. The pacing of this, considering that it's vignettes, is actually really damn good. Even though each section was distinct and wasn't a running narrative between them, I felt excited throughout the whole thing and wanted to keep going to the next story, even if the next story was a blank slate as far as pacing was concerned. The stories also all feel like Star Trek stories. Again, that's due to David having a very good handle on the universe. But I like how we're not focusing on familiar locations, or at least that's how it seems. The former Thelonian Empire, an allegory for post-USSR Russia, is a place that's altogether unique, and having that be the setting is an inspired idea. It allows David to use Trek the way it was intended, to show real-life situations set in the far future. And as much as I like Star Trek VI, I think an ongoing series using the same basic idea is better, because it can have a more expansive story. We still don't have all the details of what happened in between 6 and the Next Generation, so the fall of the USSR is a promising one that we never really got to see with the Klingons. And that cliffhanger ending is very exciting, and it makes me excited for what will happen next. And no, I haven't peeked. I want to stay blind to these, so I won't be reading it until I'm ready to put it on the schedule to review it. This book is fantastic. Sure, it's all set up and we don't even meet the entirety of the crew in it, but considering that Book 2 was released on the same day, they were likely meant to be read all at once, like how most of the Trek TV shows have two-part pilots. But it stands on its own, and I can't help but recommend it. It's a fairly unique story for Star Trek, and the fact that most of the characters are either new characters or neglected established ones make it very endearing. I'm especially interested in Solita. Something tells me that her heritage might be mixed. Mix in the badassery of Calhoun, the teasing of some TNG fan favorites returning, and the stellar characterization of the canon characters that we love, and you got a recipe for a great series. I am ecstatic that you guys chose this book, because we will definitely be revisiting this someday. In the meantime, if you'd like to see more of the Literary Lair, you can hit that subscribe button. And if you have any comments or complaints about the video, you can put those in the comment section below. Oh, and if you want to be notified of new uploads, you can hit that bell icon. And if you enjoyed this video, show it to your friends and share it around the internet. And maybe consider supporting the show on Patreon. Still revamped, by the way. Next week... well, I'll just let this clip from the movie Speed explain that to you.
I find you.
Pop quiz, hotshot.
Let's see if you sleuths can figure that clue out. See you next time. And stellar characterization of the canon characters that we love, and you've got a recipe for a great series. I am ecstatic that you guys chose this book, because we will I wasn't holding it.